Okay, greetings everyone, and welcome to the Elixir Festival. I'm Miles, and I'm joined by the esteemed astrologer Lynn Bell, who I'm so grateful for her time and her guidance and her counsel for so many years. The Elixir Festival, of course, is the coming together, the forum of wonderful wisdom keepers to help us recalibrate as the celestial time changes and to help us prime us for what's ahead. I hope by now you've had a chance to purchase my book and look through it. I'll be talking with Lynn today and some celebrated authors and world leaders of mysticism and mythology and Tibetan Buddhism in the future about some of the archetypal themes in the book. So thank you for joining us, whether you're here today or whether you will join us in the cyber world online at some future date. You're most welcome. My apologies in advance if any of Lynn Bell's particular talk was incorrect in its timing. That's my fault. And with all the time changes, my bewildered mind. So I'm very sorry, but very grateful also that we can record all of this and keep it in a nice library for you. So Lynn Bell is an astrologer of some 40 plus years and the author of several books, and she's one of the leading voices of very astute and clear-minded and reasonable, rational astrologer. Because I know there's a lot of some weird stuff out there in the world of astrology. I'm very sure, but I have personally been so grateful to listen to Lynn Bell's counsel over the years, and including her guidance for my work during the 5 years of writing Return with the Elixir. She's mentioned in the book several times. She was there to prime me and sort of get me out of my psychological modus and to help open me up to mysticism and help open me up to conversations with esoteric traditions. And so for me, the movement out of one room of Buddhism into many rooms of a large labyrinth of conversations and perspectives that I've tried to weave together in Elixir is largely due to Lynn's wonderful guidance. She caught me at the right time, and I think the world is changing in such a way that I'm so happy to have conversations and networks and bridges into the esoterica. So Lynn, thank you so much for joining us on this call. And, I'll start by just asking you how you're doing and how you're faring in the dramatic sea change, and how's it going personally for you, 2025 in particular?
Well, thank you for asking. First, it's going very well because I'm speaking to you and receiving what you say and what you've written with an open heart. And I'm very honored to be here speaking to you and to witness everything you've done in the past some years. I think it's a privilege for us in this work to follow people, to follow individuals who have a kind of bravery to jump into the void. um, and in those who have other means also and other paths. Uh, I just was, I just went to England about 10 days ago, and I went to Stonehenge and Glastonbury for the very first time. And at Glastonbury, I met with an old friend of mine from Findhorn who lived in the community for 7 years. And she's a kind of amazing mystic and spiritual guide from a working class Boston background. So she's very wisecracking mystic. And being in that place, which is, again, one of the places where something opens up in you, it was an extraordinary gift, and it was very impromptu. It wasn't planned ahead of time. It appeared as an opening for both of us. So and then I was teaching in London. So I'm in I've been in a place where I've been carried like across many miles, a little bit like you. Um, Being in different places to teach because I felt this desire to be in the presence of others. And of course, we can be in the presence of others here in this room too.
Mm.
But being in the presence of others has been a great gift for me. And by that, I mean gatherings of students or colleagues that I've had in the past few months. Mm.
Would you say that astrology is undergoing a renaissance of some sort? Or do you find that this is maybe with such an illustrious and long career, you've seen a pattern or cycle of this before, or maybe not, maybe this is unlike anything you've seen before in terms of interest and people really wanting to understand the stars again and look at their charts and really understand some of the patterns and the archetypes. What do you think?
Well, I I mean, I think astrology was in a period like that when I was young, when I discovered astrology. When many people spoke astrology uh, at a certain point in time, and there was an explosion of esoteric bookstores. When I first discovered astrology, you couldn't really learn it, but there was that language, and then people kind of fell away and it started again, but we didn't have the same technology. We didn't have the videos and the Zoom and the, as you said, the strange things that are out there. There have always been strange things in astrology, as there are everywhere. Human beings are strange, and we find our way to things. What my friend said in Glastonbury, she said, is it's an extraordinary place, but it also attracts people who are convinced that they are a manifestation of some sacred person, and you see regularly Jesus in the streets or another prophet, and you realize that the energy is working in a strange way. So I think we need to know that there's a heightened awareness and consciousness. The world is starting to make a different kind of sense.
Mm.
At the same time, it makes no sense.
Well,
Mm.
I can vouch for that. I can definitely say that I feel that.
Yeah, and I feel that extraordinary, as we step into, as you know, all the outer planets are shifting signs this year. And while two of them can do that close to each other, that three of them do that within 9 months is really extraordinary and exceptional. And it, it, we're all, none of us feel as though the world is familiar, I think. And right now, in certain places, that feels as though it's for all the wrong reasons. But internally, that creates an energy in each of us, a response which wakes up something that hasn't been awoken before.
Mm.
Mm.
I'm definitely feeling that, and I'd like to ask you before I comment, but are you feeling that too? I mean, I'm trying to just I'm trying to get a personal response from you in terms of
You are a personal response. How do I feel? Well, I feel almost okay. I feel a little bit buffeted, like a seed that's being sort of spun around and carried across long distances. And I don't, for a very long time, I can settle into myself, and then I feel buffeted again by something new. And I don't actually have the time to always catch it and integrate it. So I don't feel as though I'm integrating all the changes that are happening just yet. Uh, and it also, my sleep patterns have been quite disturbed. And so, sometimes I'm only sleeping 4 hours a night or something like that. And so then it's very hard to have that process of integration. But I'm confident that when it's ready, it will be there. Okay. So right now I feel a little like tumbleweed.
Would you characterize what we're going through as being a period of marked acceleration?
Yeah,
And
because
Hmm.
Yes, because whenever the outer planets shift, we're in a sort of new territory. It's like all of the archetypes which are being, which we're receiving, the prominent ones are shifting. And in order to really be connected to them, we also are asked to shift.
Hmm.
So that, and the Uranus has not yet entered Gemini. That happens in July. So we have 3 more to come. On May 25th, Saturn goes into Aries. That's more usual. That's every 2.5 years. And on June 9th, Jupiter goes into Cancer, which is lovely and which is every year a sign change, but is one of the great gifts in the astrological tradition, Jupiter's passage into Cancer, because it wakes up the feeling heart and the desire to care uh, for all beings.
Hmm.
And uh, then Uranus goes into Gemini, which is a sort of uh, very powerful, supercharged electrical change in the vibrational tone of physical, mental, emotional body.
Hmm.
So we haven't yet hit all the shifts. So like notes are being changed on a cosmic instrument, and each of those notes we can shift with. But as we know, sometimes sound can be a source of healing and sometimes a source of destruction.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that's a very nice imagery that you just painted there of the sort of notes or chord progression.
Mm,
It's almost like a developmental sequence, and we don't really have enough time to calibrate because sure enough, another wave is coming,
mm.
another round or another wave. But I definitely, I mean, with in talking to my clients and just looking at my own life, I definitely feel the restlessness that you're describing too. I mean, I'm not necessarily having as little sleep as you're describing, but I just think what I'm feeling is that the days and the weeks and the months go by so quickly, and things feel like there's almost a surrealness, um, like a dreamlike quality about things. I mean, I can't believe it's May already. But that acceleration feels, what it does for me is it makes me want to put the brakes on and just find one thing to hold on to or one thing to focus on. Because otherwise I feel like it could just spin out of control. I mean,
I-
for example, presidency, Trump's first 60 days in office, there was, you couldn't even hold on because it was rapid fire. And that's just one little piece of data point of our reality right now.
yeah, it's kind of and that was probably one of the goals, is that things move so quickly. It's a little bit, if you think all our roots are being, when you repot a plant, uh,
Mm.
all you're really careful about the roots, but sometimes you lose some, or sometimes you have to get rid of a mass of it. But we're being uprooted from what we have known. And so the political structure is part of that. There's an uprooting of the way things have been done, and it's intentional. It's intentionally, if it was just a tiny thing, but it's everywhere, it's like all the pots are upturned and everything's
Mm.
being planted in new soil. And it's exciting, yet we don't quite know what will come of it. And it's
Mm.
really important to realize that the first phase is into October, November, and then everything goes, except for Pluto, of course, and Jupiter and Saturn, who will stay, sorry, Jupiter, who will stay in their new signs. All the other planets will go back
Mm.
into, all the outer planets will go backwards, and we have a very watery time at the end of the year. Very different feeling.
Okay, well, let's hold the end of the year for a second because I want to zoom out if you don't mind, because
Sure.
I wrote in the book about, I tried to introduce the concept of the great year, and I know that there's different calculations about this 24,000 year cycle, and but essentially, depending on who you talk to and where it lands, there is this sense that the age is shifting from the Iron into the Bronze Age, or what the Vedic system calls the Kali Yuga, is shifting into the Dwapara Yuga. And I mentioned this to you off before we started, that Bibu Das Misra's recent book, The Yuga Shift, is a phenomenal book that I recommend anybody who's interested in the large cycle, cosmic cycles that we're amidst. He puts his calculation of the shift between ages in March 21st, 2025. So we're at this really opportune time where there is I think the most significant and optimistic piece of this idea is that for each age, there's a descending arc and an upward arc. Okay.
Mm,
And we're actually coming out of the Kali, which means we're starting to ascend
mm,
towards and of course, now the ascension is so long, like, sometimes you can't make heads or tails of what it will mean in one individual lifetime. But if you could take a multi-life perspective and remember in a way that you're a soul, you're living through a very historic time.
mm,
And actually I've tried to conceive of it this way, that you're actually responsible for the early onset or the dawn of a very important age that you might not be around to see, but you're part of its foundations.
mm.
And so we're living in a time of great responsibility. Um, anyway, so that big cycle really intrigued me, and I know people spend most of their life as scholars of just one thing. And in my book, I went all over with different kinds of maps, and a few of my mentors slapped my wrist on that, and so I leave myself up to a lot of criticism about it. But do you have any thoughts about the Great Year? Do you ever use it? Does it interest you? Do you ever have discussions about it? Does it influence any of your work?
Well, I think that it's something I encountered really early on in my astrological studies, and I remember reading all kinds of authors about it, from the Theosophists to the Rudolf Steiner, or as well as astrologers. And I know in India that there's a lot of discussions, like heated discussions about when the new age begins, which for most Hindu astrologers is in the next century. Okay, not in this century. And but a lot of people, even when I started astrology, were talking about the age of Aquarius, and of course we all know it is the dawning of, we all know the musical, but and people said, well, it's the sub-age. Most people knew it was too soon, and people would say, well, there's a sub-age. The new energy starts to move through, even as the old, there's almost like a leaking through. And that's how I tend to think about it. I haven't tried to pinpoint the exact date. That's not where I live as an
Mm,
astrologer. It's not that I'm not interested, but what I am aware of is a change that a change of proportions that we've almost never seen
mm,
astrologically during 2025 and 2026, that certainly could correlate to what you're talking about on one
mm,
level. And whether that is a preliminary opening of the age that flowers later,
mm,
as you said, it's the shifting, something's being handed or shifted, both are. And as we see, as you've talked about yourself with other researchers, the changes in technology, the extraordinary new consciousness that has been created through artificial intelligence, also
yeah,
calls up something in ourself as a response that could be an accelerator.
mm, mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I think there is a correlation, I mean, between these maps or models. So the great on the what I found was that there were three possible transitions that we are amidst. The first one is the great year transition between the Iron, and um, the Bronze Age. And then you're talking about another one, which I think so for some reason it correlates, which is the Piscean giving way to the Aquarian.
Yeah.
And then there's the great transmutation, which I think has to do with the elements.
Mm.
And if I'm not mistaken, uh, Earth into air signs for the next 200
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, there's a Jupiter-Saturn cycle that really began in the early 19th century, I mean, about 1820, uh, where Jupiter and Saturn come together. And for thousands and thousands of years, this was the cycle that all cultures paid attention to because they were the largest visible planets that could be seen to the naked eye. And now we pay attention to these more distant planets, but we couldn't see them before telescopes or before even very powerful technology revealed them physically. So Jupiter and Saturn, their 20-year cycle, they meet over and over again every 20 years in the same element. So they met in Earth, and we could say that we went very deeply into that Earth cycle. And then now we're in the air cycle, which was the same year at the end of the year, we had COVID. The first year of COVID was that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius, at the very first degree of an air sign. And again, this year we're having a major meeting of two planets at 0 degrees of Aries, Saturn and Neptune at 0 degrees of a sign. It's really kind of mind-boggling astrologically because
Well,
this
unpack it for us, Lynn, because
well,
I can hear the emphasis in you. So for me, I'm
because
still a novice. I'd like you to clarify what it is that grabs you so much there.
0 degrees is one of the ways to think about 0 degrees is it's the moment, it's the new beginning. A lot of astrology is based on, like, if you're born on a certain date, you're either a Capricorn or Aquarius. It's very, or you're a Cancer or Leo. These signs are very, very different from each other. And you're carrying another kind of planetary energy. So when something happens at 0 degrees, it's a demarcation point that emphasizes the new. It's not just a new sign, but these signs just don't happen at 0 degrees. They could happen at 20 degrees. They could happen at 17. But we can think of the 0 degrees as a power degree that contains the essence of something, the essence of all that will follow in the next 30 degrees, each sign being made up of that. So the 0 degrees in tropical astrology are the equinoxes and solstices, the moments where the light and dark are in a particular relationship. So there's like an impulse, which shift from one season, from one mode to another. Right? And so we can think of it when the great cycles are highlighting these very precise degrees. For astrologer, it makes the hair stand up on the back of our neck. We have that. This is extraordinary. It's exceptional. And, there was something else I wanted to say, but I think it got lost in the meanderings of words.
It will come back. Yeah, I was trying to, we were sort of going there. We're converging maps, the larger great year map, the map of the zodiac, and it was a diacal shift, and then the transmutation, all happening simultaneously,
Yeah,
roughly,
rough,
roughly.
rough. Yeah, and the mutation, the great mutation, the shift from earth to air, if you think of the 19th century, it's like when the culture of the machine, and to many ways, the railways and factories and the great rise of the middle class, a big economic shift from millennia of working with the land in the same way because of all these inventions that began, but also, as you write in the book, the increasing materialism that culminates in Nietzsche's pronouncement at the end of the 19th century. that what do we replace what we've created? What's the missing element? And this time, as everything, as we're in an accelerator, it's really clear everything is accelerating. If it's so important not to leave out the fundamental element of the soul or consciousness and where we're going. I think that's a lot of what your book is talking about, Miles.
Yeah, I mean, I think the flip side of all the tumult is, and all the shift is also an opening. That's how I see it. It's like, I mean, I can't talk in terms of astrology, but I can talk in terms of sort of mysticism, and maybe that's where our conversation can meet. But when I look back at the pandemic and I look back at that conjunction between Saturn, Jupiter, and I believe Pluto in somewhere in January there, I look at that as a portals, a door opened, and it's sort of, I see it as sort of the sand in the hourglass fading of one civilization, and it gets flipped over and it's a reset.
Mm, yeah.
And I think we feel it. And I guess for me, what I want to do, what I want to help these, what I like about these conversations and what they can do is it can take us out of the myopia and help us take a big deep breath and help us get some objectivity or some space and see that actually there's an opportunity amidst this crisis.
Mm,
Because the nervous system for me is, if the nervous system is tanking and it's in a fear response, um, then I think we just have a contagion of fear. And I think that's what the pandemic was less about a virus spread and more about a fear and contagion of fear spread across the entire planet. And it showed us just how vulnerable and susceptible we are to the vibration that we each cast. And now that vibration of fear maybe shifts into division.
mm,
And rather than getting, hijacked, I always like to try to see what's underneath it or what else is possible at the very same time, just depending on your perspective. And as these tectonic shifts shift or move, yes, we get destabilized, but also there are openings for something new. And one of them, I think, is to go past the material sensibility and to reconnect with soul or, non, extraterrestrial phenomenon. For example, the aliens is a big harbinger, I think. And also the fact that I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've had clients that have much more numinous experiences.
mm.
There's also a very big call for a renaissance of psychedelic movement. And I think all of these are not coincidence. I think they're happening in a tapestry or in a motif that we can talk about.
Mm.
And I think it's more beneficial to us to see it from the side of the opportunity side and less from the fear side.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's so easy to get caught by the fear every day with your morning. If you read the news every day, it's that, oh my God, you can immediately, I find myself immediately going there. And then you have to pull back and see, all right, what does this mean archetypally? What's happening here? And very early in your book, you talk about Asclepius and
Mm.
Hermes and the snakes up the rod. And because Uranus is going into Gemini, and Gemini is the sign ruled by Mercury, the first sign ruled by Mercury. It is the sign of the twins. It's the sign of light and dark and light and shadow. I mean, and you're in Bali, which is a culture built completely around that idea. So that everything is about keeping these forces in balance. So what it might seem is that some forces are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. The Uranus in Gemini obliges an awareness of the two sides, we could say. And those myths are at the core of uh, awakening and healing.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I mean the visitation of Asclepius at the outset of the book, which, for me in real time happened maybe 4 years ago now, took me by utter surprise. But it did, by following that down the rabbit hole, what that took me into was, of course, Asclepius, the Greek god of healing, the sanctuary of Asclepius, or the Asclepion. And that, to me, became an archetype to follow.
Mm.
I became absolutely, and I know that you've spent some time in Greece. Have you ever visited one of the Asclepions?
Yeah, I have.
Was it the one at Epidaurus, or which one
Yes.
did? Yes. I mean, I was just so impressed with this idea that in a bygone year they had holistic health before we even had the word, and they knew how to really heal with all these multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary modalities, from diet and exercise and purification and hot and cold bath and temple sleep. I mean, sleep incubation. I'm having this great researcher at the end of the month come, Sarah Janes, who lives in Epidaurus and does the revival of the Asclepion. I mean, she's basically part of a movement of reviving this
Mm.
great tradition of natural healing, including sleep and diet and exercise and catharsis with theater. Anyway, it was so inspiring, and I think it was part of this archetype of going back, well back, in order to go forward, because we're in a civilizational crisis opportunity window moment. And so part of this was a recollection, was a going back to revive something old, because we've lost touch with all of these ways. I mean, anybody who's had any medical surgeries recently knows what it's like. It's like a soulless experience, and you're just a piece of meat on a conveyor belt, mostly in industrialized medicine, not to mention the absolute absurdity that I believe it's Monsanto and Bayer have. I think Bayer, the pharmaceutical company, owns Monsanto, so that you have this very diabolical combination of the genetically modified plants that we ingest and that are making us sick, is the on ramp into pharmaceuticals that are supposedly the cure, owned by the same company. And I think, across the world, we are starting to unveil this level of corruption and just sheer madness. It's
Mm.
sort of like, as the pillars of our civilization crumble, we see the cracks of just how dark and insidious and
Yeah.
corrupt it is. But what it does is, this is what I'm saying, between this tension between light and dark and shifting and opening, is that, yes, now we see, and it also gives us a chance to go back and retrieve something that probably will be far more
Mm.
egalitarian and accessible, and more cost effective, and natural and humane and dignified. And so,
Here,
I mean,
here in France, Miles, and last year I did this. I went on a 3-week thermal retreat, which is reimbursed by the French Social Security, where you're bathing in the hot underground water every day. And different places are for different illnesses, and this still exists all over parts of Europe, France,
wow.
Italy, Switzerland, Germany, as something people do on a regular basis.
Mm,
So it's never entirely disappeared. One of the things that astonished me when I was teaching at Chart, I used to be part of these week-long 8-day workshops at Chart, and with great teachers like Carolyn Mays and Andrew Harvey and Rupert Sheldrake and Jean Houston, really amazing people. And I was doing research because there weren't that many French speakers there. So one day I was doing research in the library, and I discovered that in the Middle Ages, there was a widow who was actually paid by the church to welcome pilgrims who came to Chartres for healing, and they would spend 9 days and 9 nights sleeping in the crypt, waiting for a healing dream. And this came because the cathedral, there was a bishop named Fulbright in the Middle Ages who had the burning disease, which probably means he ate ergot, and
mm,
ergot is a vasoconstrictor, so your toes and feet fell off. and he had a dream where the mother, the virgin, came to him, and he writes, and suckled me as if I were a babe.
Mm.
And after the dream of being breastfed by the Divine Mother, his symptoms all disappeared.
Mm.
And so following that, pilgrims would come for a healing dream.
Yeah.
In the period we consider the Middle Ages in Europe. But a lot of that was just, we don't talk about those things anymore.
Yeah, but maybe we should start talking about them. And that's, I guess that's my point, is that's what a great opportunity to reconnect with an old tradition that has something to teach us about how to live a more vital life, a more integrated life, a more whole life. Because the age that we are coming out of has disembodied us. It's disenchanted us, as Rick Tornes likes to say. We're not connected with the stars. We're not connected with these celestial cycles. We're not connected with the earth. We're not connected with our own biorhythms. And then you get people like you that remind us about the stars, and it's their potency and can help actually guide us and give us an actual experience of proper counsel or vision, insight, literally insight. And you get people like Sarah Janes, who's going to join us, who are leading people to Egypt and back. I mean, she actually has permission at the Epidaurus Asclepion to sleep the night there for incubation. And I'm so fascinated by it. It actually really, it makes me feel hopeful, I guess. And I think that's really, really needed. That, I mean, I have a lot of friends, and these kind of dialogues have stimulated a conversation where, just as things are decaying and being destabilized, the sapling of innovation is also appearing. New alternatives are also appearing.
I,
Here,
I,
yeah.
I think it has appeared over and over again at different times, and then it gets kind of like somebody builds something on top of it, or hides it from view or whatever. And we are in a time where the alternative is so bleak that our need to keep it growing, our need to keep it alive is increasing. And that means a lot more of us will wake up to that, to the importance of that. Because I think in many stories over and over again, the seed which can change everything is born, but it's not, it's only seen by a few people or watered by a few people.
And one of the things about the Aquarian Age supposedly is that more people, so-called ordinary people, will have access to greater gifts. So, I mean, which is maybe a segue for us, because I did want to just throw a few archetypes your way to get your 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 forecast or your impression, your astrological impression. I mean, in the book, I lay out a few archetypes about the incoming Aquarian age. Mostly I lay these out and I put them to you because hopefully through this conversation you can help us prepare. I mean, that's what these kinds of conversations, that's what a forecast is for, right? When you sit down with your clients, you're talking about possibilities, and hopefully helping people align with the possibilities so that they can make the most of their own their own intuitions. What, maybe I'll lay out a couple of them and you can choose if anyone strikes you. But so we're talking about some of the characteristic hallmarks of the incoming energy in terms of the Aquarian age. And this is more global archetypes and less about any individual dates or spans of time within this year, for example, but just globally. One, of course, is this idea of decentralization, and another one is discernment, and a final one is divinity. So I came up with these 4Ds, and I'm not remembering the fourth one, but But you
Discernment, unity, and the first one,
was
the first
decentralization.
decentralization. Yeah.
I mean, on the ground, people can feel these things happening, but in any one moment, maybe we don't have the larger picture that this is sort of the way things are going to go. Power structure, for example, is shifting.
Power structure.
And
And it looks like people are trying to consolidate it into a kind of mega power structure that the individual can't do much against. But that probably also has to do with, I mean, some of the opportunities that AI are going to bring, which are kind of creating your own pathway in a dialogue. If it stays pure or free or in that creative potential. And if machines can do a lot of what we could do, like as an astrologer, I learned to, for example, calculate charts by hand. And, then computers came along and did all this that was extremely time consuming, and you would make mistakes and you would do all this. But it freed us for something. It freed the work for more space to be present, or it freed there was a ritual process that you went through with mathematics that was very interesting, I found. But and I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I don't do it anymore. And so I think we will be freed. So when you say decentralization, there is a freeing of possibility. Even getting rid of the Department of Education, there's a negative idea of that, and there's a very powerful positive idea of that, of what happens when human beings are not like pushed onto this one singular pathway, but that there are pathways made for them that are very individual or personal. And then it depends who's making those things and who's designing them, or how we have access to them or not. So that's decentralization, and which can be used in many different ways. And we can talk about it as Aquarius. Aquarius has both that big brother side. Every sign has a shadow side. So the shadow side is big brother. The shadow side is the we that decides everything for the I. And the other side is that the multiplicity of individuality flowers in a way it's never been seen before. And if we think that the globe became, that everybody on the globe became so similar that we're all wearing t-shirts and jeans all over the planet, that we almost became one through economic, let's say from an economic pursuit. And then now something else is going to happen, because what again, as human beings are very perplexing and confounding, they're also inspiring and
innovative.
divine. So we can imagine that those faculties can open up, because there's only so many bowls of popcorn you can eat watching football. But but then again, that may not. What do we do with our freedom as it is, right? What do we do with that, and how do we? So there are really big choices coming. I think big opportunities.
Yeah, one of this, when you say individual freedom, I think there seems to be a number. Well, I presented these monolithic archetypes, but as you rightly say, they have almost like a sister or a shadow. This idea that we could come into an energy or an age where there's a lot more personal empowerment, and then of course there would be the backlash where there's a sort of authoritarian crackdown. I mean, I think we saw that during the pandemic, and we may see waves of this where there's large scale people's movement that are blanketing the planet right now, whether they be in the global south, or they be the farmers march, or they be Black Lives Matter or Me Too or whatever they might be, where there's a push for the marginalized to come forward and to to have their moment and to be seen and to be included. And then you see a sort of, so almost like a crackdown or a kind of retaliation or a counter push. And this sets up this kind of tension. Now, I don't know if this tension builds towards a crescendo and then there's some sort of transformation, if it's like an archetypal kindling or ignite a process of igniting something where it goes back and forth.
Yeah, I think the decentralization, the this idea that was growing really strongly in the world, let's say with Neptune and Pisces, okay, which is what are all the possible ways we can be human, you know, including gender, including seeing things from other perspective. And though there may have been overreach from some of those things, whenever you open up something new, it's almost like, again, like the seeds have flown everywhere, like of these new ideas or new possibilities. Will all of them take root in the new time? Probably not. But some of them will. And as Neptune, which is the primary planet for visioning the divine, okay, for the primary channel through which the divine comes to us, let's say, has now entered Aries, okay, which is again the first sign, the singularity, the sign of everything beginning anew, giving huge power to one idea, not a multiplicity of ideas, but that we are asked to choose in a way where we stand, where we root, what we say, this is who I am to. And that is part of the way to the divine right now, when each person is called to that.
Did you say that that had to do with Neptune specifically?
I did, because one of the ways to see Neptune, you know, of course, in India, Neptune belongs to Shiva, who's both creation and destruction, right? But it's the trident, Neptune symbolized by that trident, the three worlds, the three ways of being. But the upward points pull down something, pull down, again, if possibility is infinite or possibility is endless, Neptune then brings in those things through a particular archetype, which is right now the sign of Aries. So while it was in Pisces for 12 years, this is the period we experienced the extraordinary growth of interest in astrology, for example, the whole time of what Neptune in Pisces, this whole sense of the esoteric are very, very strong in people's consciousness. But Neptune in Aries is almost like there's an individual choice, element of individual choice, which is very powerful right now. And I don't know exactly what that will mean or what form that will take. And Saturn is coming to join Neptune. And just quickly, this is a 35-year, 36-year cycle that we last saw in 1989, when and the time before that was 52, 53, and the time before 1917. And so one cycle, 1917, is the Russian Revolution. It's a major upheaval in all the structures of the world when the map and boundaries of everything are redrawn. The Ottoman Empire ends, essentially. A great empire that existed for hundreds of years suddenly is, let's say, doesn't exist anymore, gives up all its territories. And there are great convulsions. The story is not that simple. In the 50s, there's a standoff of the Cold War, the hydrogen bomb, the you could say the structures of fear that hold the world in a way. And in 1989, there's the fall of the Berlin Wall again, and a kind of global, where boundaries are broken and we're all connected in a whole. And this time right now, it seems like we're closing again, but that might only be an illusion. It may not be the truth of what's happening right now. Right. So.
And underneath it, are you suggesting it's like a potential that it's up to us, or
Yeah, it is one of the ways we think about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And by the way, for those in New York, my friend Maurice Fernandez is giving a talk on this in New York this week at the Theosophical Society, to be seen if you're there. Is one of the ways it works is the planets are very close to each other, but they don't quite make a perfect connection, and they don't do that till February next year. So you could say we're, in a way, choosing possibilities, either a very closed system or which will dominate, the vision of new possibilities or the dream of absolute control by certain individuals who have power over all the
yeah,
others. Okay, that's that right now. We could say those two possibilities have been offered very clearly, but there may be many between now and next year when the conjunction actually happens perfectly.
I can't help but we've already talked about it, but to bring back AI in this vein here too,
Sure.
because I mean, it seems to be the biggest innovation that, so much can happen. It could, I mean, it occupies the imagination in terms of its dramatic sea change that it can bring in, or that will bring in, that will be brought in, you know, wholesale joblessness, for
Mm,
example. And that can go both ways. I mean, what do you do when people are out of work because they've been replaced by an intelligence greater than them? On the one hand, maybe governments. I mean, I was listening to a podcast where they were saying basically that's not just about the individuals, whole nations. If they have no workforce, how do they? We've created a structure based on economics that requires people to be buying and selling and consuming and producing. So it just you get this massive expansion of problems into the realm of systemic, and nobody really knows what will be entailed. I mean, maybe someone suggests that this is the beginning of the end in terms of being on the assembly line, and then suddenly you'll have universal basic income or something like that. But that even that can go both ways. Is universal basic income, does that mean socialism, communism? Who's making the rules, and does everybody just want to earn the same thing, and or does it, as you put in your own personal example when you said that you were a student of doing the charts by hand, and then all of a sudden the computer could free you up for something creative. And
mm,
so here's that tension. Even if you just look at it that way, on one side, there's this possibility that it disempowers us, makes us almost like a second class citizen to some artificial
mm.
intelligence and maybe a few authorities that own the whole infrastructure. Or does it turn and make us completely revolutionize our perspective on what it means to be human, and what it means to have time, and what we value, what we really value? And that lets in so many hopeful notes of consideration. But I think every time we get to this point, what I think where I land is it really, does it become a choice for each one of us? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think it depends on which point of the arc of change you're in, right? And, we can think about it also, again, if you go back to the beginning of the 20th century to 1917, until World War I, culture was basically happened with horses. Like horses were, everybody had a barn in Paris. I lived in a converted barn actually for some time, but the horses were everywhere. There were a few motor cars before World War I, but not very many. And then it's almost like everything changed. So what happened to all those couriers and blacksmiths and stable owners and trainers? What did they do? Okay, who do you become? You don't necessarily go from the animal to the car. You might go
Mm.
somewhere you might go nowhere, right? You might die of a broken heart as your horses no longer have a place. And one of the things that will happen is the generations that never knew the internet will disappear. There will no longer be humans that have not known that, haven't known the phone in their hand in the Nepalese hinterland on pilgrimage, right? I mean, so what we can hope is that something's freed up. I don't know, I've been hearing about the telepathy tapes. Have you been hearing about this? There are some tapes of, I haven't watched, I've only heard about them secondhand, but about autistic children who seem to be having telepathic awareness of things to know. So there's so many things that our culture does not, it chooses, our parents and our culture select certain traits because it serves the culture and it serves the family. And some things emerge because they're so strong in us they cannot not emerge. But if you think about it, we all have within us these extraordinary abilities. But for those of, I mean, you're a mystic and I'm do what I do. And I've always had that in me, but there was no mirror for it in the world around me when I was growing up. And in a traditional culture, it probably would have been seen or recognized in some way as, oh, somebody who sees the connections or who is watching or who remembers or who is observing. And what's possible is that all of that will have more room to emerge because it's not in the, as you've said, basically smothered by concrete in your own crisis, your feeling of being in a world that felt denatured. And now you're in another world and that hasn't necessarily solved everything to be in that world because there's still
very true.
The reflection of who we are, right? It isn't, it's changed a lot of things, but it isn't in itself a solution.
Well, that's absolutely profound. I mean, it's worth pausing. I mean, because it's not I mean, it's not a light switch moment. It's a series. It's a series of choices. Coming to Bali for me, you're right. I mean, it's more like a labyrinth journey. You turn one corner and you get another separate set of challenges. But along the way, something globally has shifted without a doubt. And it's been so incremental that maybe in any given moment you don't really realize it. But certainly when you start looking at a 5-year period of writing the book and you look back, then yes, definitely openings, shifts in perspective have occurred. Yeah, so what I take from what you say is to leave it at this sort of monumental or monolithic choice point. Maybe nothing in life is actually like that. It's more like a series of choices that do, in that analogy of like the ship that takes a 1-degree turn, in any given moment it doesn't really calibrate, but over the long term, that those shifts add up to a massive destination shift.
Yeah. I was having that conversation when I was in England at a conference that a friend of mine put on, and she said, it's almost like we're still, everything changed after COVID. Everything changed, the way we gather, the way we relate to each other. We haven't really come to terms with it yet. And I think that's true. We haven't come to terms with what changed. And we haven't come to, and even more is changing. And so, we can say there have been these punctuation marks in the evolution of the world we live in and the form that evolution has taken, whether they're semicolons or hard stops, or commas, something is, we know something's changed, and as you said, I think it's very beautiful what you said. If you look at the 5 years, it's not one thing, or not everything goes the way you have, but if you look at it globally, yeah. Mm. And
Yeah, I mean
I
something as simple as like home ownership, or rooting my family in the same place, or working in the same career, or working with the same people, or this idea that there was meant to be this sort of established place or home or fixed
Mhm.
status, or I mean, I don't, my life has changed so dramatically that I basically live in a suitcase with a laptop now. It's here, there, and everywhere. And the way I look at housing, or the way I look at raising two kids, it used to be about giving them a stable home. I mean, it must have been a meme or an archetype that I inherited from the past generation, but that I don't I don't look at life that way anymore. And whatever solace or comfort it provided me, now there's the other side of it is adventure and new connections and new horizons. And so again, it's like, yes, something was lost
Mm,
and then something opened,
mm,
and they come together and they are never separated.
yeah, yeah. But the adventure, when you say now it's like adventure, this is Aries. And this is Neptune going into Aries. It's and did the word digital nomad exist? 10
Right.
years ago, there's a
Yeah.
whole, now there's a whole community of digital nomads of,
Yeah.
so we come back to my image of the seed that's being blown by the wind through space and not knowing where it lands. I mean, I would say for myself that one of the things has been probably in 2020, as a friend of mine joked, was like the astrologer's full employment act, like it was I look back and I think what I have these lists of webinars I've done. I'm like, you did all that, like, I mean, I don't remember, so that's what I mean. There's a moment for integrating everything,
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
moment of so muchness.
Yeah.
Uh,
We might need another global shutdown for us to stay still long enough to integrate it all.
yeah, or a personal a personal shutdown, like a personal time. No, but but in your nature, being a fiery nature, Miles, if I can say that, if it's okay that I talk about you being fiery, which is,
Yes.
you
Yeah. Yeah.
something of an
For, for,
understatement,
for better and for worse.
for better and for worse. The fiery spirit loves the call to adventure. Okay. It is its principal motor. And now the time is calling those individuals in some way. There's a resonance in the time because of that. The way it looks astrologically is that you have the two planets in air that are trining, and then the conjunction in fire in early Aries in the middle, right in the middle on the midpoint of the other. So it's like it's a very strong vessel for fire.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
and fire again is creative and destructive. It's got both. It's full of rage and full of joy.
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Full of destruction and full of renewal.
full of renewal. Absolutely. And full
Hmm.
of the divine spirit.
Yeah. That divine spirit, I mean, we have to go there for a little bit here, Lynn, because I also think that that's one of the flip side, or the graces that can come in. And it's coming in, I think, in a number of different ways. You raised those, what they called, the telepathic files. What were they called? I've also only by secondhand.
Telepathy tapes. Yeah, only by
Telepathy tapes. Okay. Then there's, you know, the UFO phenomenon, which, I see as just a modern iteration of how people used to see angels or divinities. And of course, I live in Bali, so divinities are still seen here in
Mm,
Bali. There's this idea that the veils are thin in Bali, and the culture is still primed to see the world beyond just the paradigm of materialism, that there's always, it's a multi-dimensional reality that we live in here in Bali.
mhm,
And the the faithful, the customs and the ritual here acknowledge that there are more divinities than can meet the eye.
mm,
And there are small bastions of cultures across the planet that have preserved that long legacy, but mostly the industrialized cultures have lost them all. And as we mentioned earlier during the tectonic shifts, is this the edifice of this materialistic paradigm becomes weakened, I think something comes through the cracks.
yeah.
So I think more people are having extraterrestrial encounter. I think more people are having even just simply more intuitive experiences and synchronicities. I think people are having deeper and more profound or prophetic dreams. I tried to write at the outset of my book that I had a couple of visions. I don't proclaim to be prophetic, but I part of what I wanted to disclose about with those was that I think more people have them than we care to share.
Mm,
And that actually that there is a kind of two-way communication that's happening. Information is coming in, new kinds of information, or maybe old kinds of information. I look at my teachers in the Tibetan world, and of course, there hasn't been any separation between the material world and the deva realms or the extra, the
mm,
alternate agencies, the deities. All of this to say that I have a sense that more people are awakening, more people are having contact. I think the UFO phenomenon, maybe 99% of it is BS. But the 1% that exists, I think probably represents some shift that's happening in our culture, in our monolithic industrialized culture, that we're starting to expand our horizons, start to see the limitations, for example, of the paradigm that we've been living in. Another example of this was in the pandemic, where I think the reliance or the over reliance on science was revealed to us, just how over reliant on science we had become, and that science can't actually answer and everything. And as evidenced by, you get two polar sides on, is the virus gonna is does it exist or does not exist? Does mass work? Does And the science starts to break down. And my teacher Geshe Tenzo Zopa said, you have to have science. Science has to be part of the conversation, but it can never replace the direct perception of the numinous.
mm,
And I think one of the Aquarian energies is that, just used to be a few great prophets that would have those direct encounters. I have a sneaky suspicion over time, slowly, if we're really on the upswing, or if we're really going towards an ascension, more people will begin to tap in.
mm.
More people
Well, that's
will
yeah,
begin to be resensitized.
I was telling you the story earlier in that I went to Glastonbury, and my friend who lives there says there's always these people there, they get something, but it blows their structure apart, where they believe something they've had an experience that they haven't had. Like I sort of, so at the same time, that's true. Like society, we could all, I, I remember that the other worlds used to, I was talking to a friend who first went to China in the early 90s, and she said it was the first time in her life she'd ever been in a place so other. And somebody else was at the dinner who went last year and, and said the same thing, but it wasn't other in the same way. So the worlds we live in have shaped us or directed our consciousness, just like language shapes our brain.
Mhm.
So right now we could say the celestial energies from an astrological point of view are coming in completely differently with an opportunity to shape us, our consciousness, our awareness, and what emerges in new ways. But as you've said in your book, the social models, the governmental models, the behavioral models that benefit certain people want us to stay in a certain type of behavior and constant and decide. Sometimes it isn't even conscious, it's just sometimes it's just what's happened. Certain things have been selected out. But I was some years ago, I found a book about voices people hear, and it's a scientist who said that basically 25% of people hear voices, except
Mm.
that because hearing voices has become associated with schizophrenia, nobody actually mentions that they hear voices anymore. But when you talk to people, I often hear voices in my dreams, like a voice
Mm.
will make a pronouncement or
Mm.
give me important information. Often enough.
Mm.
But in the Theosophists used to talk about clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience, all of these abilities that a lot of people at the end of the 19th century were interested in developing. And then
Mm.
something happens and it all gets kind of flattened out. There's a curve, again, that's like the sapling you were talking about earlier, the sapling, the mystical sapling appears, and then something's built around it so that we don't have access to it again.
Yeah.
But right now, it feels like all the conditions are right for something to emerge that hasn't been seen before.
Mhm. That's very confirming and validating, actually. I'd love to hear that from you.
Mm.
Uh, Lynn, I noticed that a couple people joined us around 8 o'clock. Let me just apologize to them because likely they were among the group that thought we were going to start at 8 o'clock. So I apologize. We started at 7 p.m. Bali time, 7 a.m. EST. So my apologies for that. But everything is recorded, so you'll get the first half of the conversation with Lynn Bell, esteemed astrologer who is helping to awaken us on this very call right now. Lynn, you wanted to take us into a direction of a forecast?
Did I?
There was something very significant towards the end of the year, I think, that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think that it probably what's important right now is the next shift, which is very, very soon, is Saturn going into Aries. And I gave a workshop on this for Astrology University, so if people are interested, it's already available as a recording. I did that a couple of weeks ago. And because Saturn has it has a reputation for being the worst place for Saturn, because it's hard and it's a little bit brutal. It's almost like you're not just cutting, when you cut the plant in your garden, you cut it too short and it almost doesn't survive. So there's a little bit of that energy about to enter the world with Saturn going into Aries on May 25th or 6th, depending on where you are in the world. But then on June 9th, Jupiter enters the sign where it's exalted. And Jupiter being a benefic, being the grace of being grace that makes an appearance in our world, again, opens through through caring for other living beings. So we don't have long between those two manifestations in the world, which is like 2 weeks basically, which is great. And then in July, Uranus enters Gemini, this very powerful electrical, like, wait a minute, what's true, what's not true here? It's almost, I think Uranus and Gemini either splits us radically into two different visions of right, wrong, real, unreal, etc., etc., or it wakes everybody up to, wait a minute, shaking off the spells that have been created through the way we talk to ourselves, through the way others talk to us, through the information that flows into our life through social media, etc., or other circuits of awareness, and that there is a kind of a direct connection. So you talked about extraterrestrials and the idea that they're like angels or divinities. But I just, to take this back, I had a very good friend who was really convinced they were already here, and who died recently, Michael Luton, wonderful astrologer, and who had had encounters. He, you know, if you look in perspective, in 1920, there were no proof there were other galaxies. There was no proof there was anything outside the solar system until 1920. I think it's 22 or 23. Nothing. Scientists said, well, it's a theory, but it may or may not exist. We are the only solar system. Those pinpoints in the sky, there's no proof there's something else. No, but really, if you think about that, that's a very 100 years ago. We actually knew that the galaxies existed. So there's all the way the planets are forming indicate there's a similar leap in consciousness. In 1969 was the first time we actually saw pictures of the Earth, except in mystical out-of-body visions. That's also a very short time ago. We didn't have this image of the Earth as a big spinning blue and white ball. That did not exist. So the collective imagings we have now are very different than we might have had 200 years ago. And it's so, the way the planets are coming together are so powerful, so strong, so perfect. Again, in astrology, perfection. And of course, it's what was taught in the Middle Ages, or still in Tibetan learning, the harmonies of mathematics and music and astronomy, they're all part of geometry, all parts of ways of knowing and perception, that the different functions of the brain. There's a new function of our brain that's going to be awakened by the way these energies come in. Unless certain forces that want power manage to control things so that it's all channeled in a different direction. Okay, and I don't think, we can see that happening in the world right now. We can see that very large numbers of people can be controlled.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not just a fantasy, that it's a reality. And so that it is a very powerful moment. And as the planets go backwards in the fall, so Saturn goes back into Pisces, Neptune goes back into Pisces, Uranus goes back into Taurus. As that happens, what has first emerged might kind of waver and lose force. And if what has first emerged is a negative possibility, that could be wonderful, right? It's almost like we're all afraid of the negative potential of certain governments to control citizens. So if that, then it goes back into, particularly the Piscean energy is like as a solvent, right? So you put something back in, and it, to be purified, can be very messy. And then it reemerges in the February period. Everything starts to pop back into the news signs early next year. So there's this, it's important to know it's all moving right now. It's all fluid. It's like we're looking at the future move. I imagine it like the mandalas that are drawn in the sand, right, on certain occasions, and then wiped away.
Wiped away.
Right? So we're in that period of mandalas being drawn and wiped away. And when we meditate on those and they're wiped away, what happens?
Yeah. Well, that's the key there, is that the vibration that underlies the mandala is, if you can keep it constant, then it can be rebuilt or redesigned anywhere based on the vibration. So the idea that the three-dimensional mandala, whether it be made of sand or brick or steel, or if it's a painting, uh, what's important is the underlying the the seed syllable or the mantra of the deity, the vibration. If that remains constant, then the mandala can be resurrected anywhere, where in any place.
Correct.
I raise that because I think it returns back to what we were talking about at the top of the conversation, where amidst this swirl, I mean, I even watching you with your hand gestures, Lynn, it's like, yes, you're doing this dance as you describe like how the winds are taking us, or the currents are taking us. And you're talking about and then you talk about this very important sort of energetic moment
Mm,
where, and if I heard you right, you're talking about it's almost like a lightning splitting a tree in two,
mm,
is the image that I got. And I do feel like that could happen in any number of ways. In a way, polarization has already divided us across the planet so severely, but I think AI will definitely do another number on us where, and I think Pam Gregory likes to talk about this. Are you going to choose the side of being, you know, absorbed into the technology, or are you going to, double down on just being human?
mm.
So that's another place where this uh, division can come in. But the other one I was thinking about also is, are you going to regress back into the materialistic paradigm, or are you going to make a concerted effort to keep your pulse on the spirit inside of you?
Mm.
And then I liked what you said, and I think I'm really going to take that away. So it's not one choice point, but it's a continual choice point, like one bead on a rosary, one meditation session in the morning, followed by another yoga session, followed by another cup of tea, where we keep asking ourselves the question very, very subtly, like, what are we? Who are we? And where are we going? There's something about the overload and the deluge of information across all these platforms and gadgets, where I think, you could get swept away in a way that's by design.
Mm.
Um, but in another way, there is an opportunity. People that are listening to this right now, I'm sure all of them have their personal practice. They're
Mm.
coming to conversation like this already in a way loaded, in a
Mm.
good way. They've already made a connection with a tradition or a practice, or have these points of contacts, have these reminders. And then it's just about really seeing how significant it is, a choice every day to choose more of that connection with spirit.
Mm.
Now, especially, and
And
because this idea that the of discernment, I think, fits here, the archetype of discernment, because perhaps forevermore we may never know truth from reality if we are just gazing with our reality eyes, our three-dimensional eyes. Now is the and therefore now is the time for the third eye, the necessity of the third eye of intuition, to be able to really know the difference, but just to check, to keep checking at the very least. The
mm.
other day I sent out a blog. I liked this image that I found. I mean, it wasn't like as in like I was, you know, you know, it was the image of the Hollywood signs during the LA fires, ablaze. And I thought, oh, this is a very potent archetypal image, like the end of a chapter. And of course, the purification by fire. And then somebody, very kindly wrote me an email saying that that's an AI generated image. It never caught on fire. And then I had this moment where I was like, well, that's precisely the point, isn't it? I mean, it's like layer upon layer of deception are built into that very moment. And so how many counter checks and counterbalances do we need to really return to some basic sanity and to really, really be able to know truth from deception? Are we going to outsource that? Are we going to, who are we going to rely on to tell us what's actually true? Um, Now's the time. I mean, look, every leader feels like, it's either one who's senile or another narcissist. I mean, isn't isn't it just telling us, isn't it just telling us that there are no good choices out there? If not for the very reason that we have to begin to trust something deeper inside of us when it comes to leadership. That's how I reframe that.
Yeah, and that again is Aries leadership, uh, taking, having the courage to take a totally new path, to take the lead in your own life, to not be a follower. But I want to go back to the mandala because that, when you were talking about the vibration of the mandala, that it represents an individual divinity. Well, the birth chart's a mandala.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't catch that.
yeah, and Dane Rudhyar, the great 20th century astrologer, used to wrote a book called An Astrological Mandala on the 360 degrees of the zodiac. So the birth chart is a mandala for each of us, a personal one, right? So if you take that individual mandala of the birth chart, and then you look at, there's a particular geometry coming in with, especially, for example, in July 2026, all the outer planets will be at 4 degrees of their new signs and plus Jupiter. So it's what we call a perfect aspect. It's almost like a perfect tuning fork going through each of our individual mandalas. So some of us are absolutely precisely attuned to those things, but all of us will receive them globally. And so that's the kind of time that's coming, is we're seeing these kind of kind of perfect celestial geometry, which is rare. And it has to have an extraordinary creative power.
Lynn, I caught there was a juxtaposition between the individual chart and I would assume something more collective. Can you just, I know it's a little bit of a digression, but when you talk about the potency of some of these celestial alignments, are you saying that for some people, because of their birth chart, they will be particularly influenced while others not?
Yes. Well, I was trying to avoid being so specific, but for example, right, this year, there are many planets between 0 and 2 degrees of the fire and air signs. 0 and 2 degrees. So that means if you're born the first 2 or 3 days of a sign, or you have planets at those places in your chart. So this is technical, you need to know your chart. But let's say you're born on March 21st, like a friend of mine who'll be in Paris next week, you will be receiving this, the first gathering of planets particularly strongly. Okay? And like anything, in 2026, the structure I was talking about will happen at 4 degrees, not at 0, 1, and 2. So slightly late on. But then there are other points, depending on the system you're using, that will receive these. So planets at 19 or planets at 15 to 17 are also, if we use an eightfold division rather than just the classic astrological divisions, will also be receiving these potently. So it's more technical. That's why I didn't go into it in detail. Okay. And yet, at the same time, another way of thinking about it is if we say, for example, that if you're born with Saturn in Aries, so let's say you were born in 1997, 98, early 99, Saturn is returning to Aries. And we say it begins as soon as it reaches the sign. So there are different ways to talk about the resonances that happen with these particular structures. So there's the really specific structures that are coming together. And then there's the global shift in energy. Those structures, that's the moment. It's like the moment where the mandala is drawn and that particular vibration is learned or remembered or received by everyone in the collective. And for some people, personally lights up their chart in many, many ways. Right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Okay, but we all get it.
Yes. Yes.
So if that's clearer.
Yeah, it is clear. And I was a bit cheeky there for a second. My mind wandered and I had this little bit of a fantasy. We're gonna wrap up soon, Lynn. I know your time is precious. I
What
just
was your fantasy, Miles?
yeah, my fantasy was like, can I ask Lynn a personal question? Like, how far ahead into the future do you go with by candlelight into your consultation with the future? I was just because I've had I know in one of our previous private sessions you talked about you almost look at 2 or 3 year spans,
but for
and
most, yeah.
but they're like 2 or 3 years ahead. And I know that when Maurice Fernandez wrote his epic, you know, essay on the conjunction, he wrote it in 2016 and the conjunction was 2020. So how often do you look ahead and what do you see?
It depends. It depends if somebody asked me to do it because all right, the way I work is or my belief. Okay, so let's talk about my belief. I've been thinking about this in two different ways. So my belief is that we co-create, or like things don't just happen to us through the energies, but you can see a moment where things close in your individual life, as you know all too well, and then it's a little bit like being in the tumbler cycle for a long time, and then it's finished and you emerge and everything is different. So we can see that. And so when somebody is coming up to that, you're not going to say, well, in 20, sometimes people will ask me, then I will look. But the thing is how are you going to get there? So if I just say you're going to get to this at this time, there are people that I know a woman who went to see a famous astrologer in France, and she said, well, he just told me I'm going to be in a really difficult period for 7 years, so there's no point in even seeking for anything or
Yeah.
trying to do anything. I just have to wait till it's over. I mean, that was her interpretation of what he said. But
Yeah.
I'm very careful because I understand that sometimes as an astrologer, as much as I try to bring information in the most open-ended way, people feel like it's a sentence they've been given sometimes when it's difficult. And I really would prefer that doesn't happen. And there's a always choice and sometimes, as you know, there's less choice than others because we're in a period of internal or external necessity. And recognizing that is incredibly powerful. And where we get to depends on us, not
Well,
just
now, yeah,
that
I'm
out
sorry.
there. And I really truly believe that. That's why I don't talk about what's going to happen 20 years from now. But if somebody asked me to write an article about it, I might do it, but you have to do a lot of research and you're basically, we're all built differently. So because I work with individuals, I like to stay in what's emerging and where it's going. And with some people, we talk about the next 3 months, and with other people, we talk about the next 6 months. And with some people, it's a larger. But I had So that's the answer to your question. It's not that it's not possible, it's just that it requires, I would say, a sort of leap. And these things are, some of it's training and some of it's predilection. Mm.
Lynn, I suppose when, I mean, and I've been in the client seat with you. I mean, we come to you and we come to astrologers and we are naturally averse to hearing all the bad news for the next 3 years. We just want someone to tell us how's it gonna be. And I've been in the seat with you with like it's been years, Lynn. Can I have some fucking good news, please?
I said, well, and I have done that. I've said, by such and such a date, well, you have another.
2 more years, Lynn.
Well, yeah, but
2 more years for this cycle. Oh my God. But then I mean as the thing that I came away from, I mean, I think in hindsight it's always 2020. In the book, I'm basically talking about in multiple traditions, the idea of averting your hardship is actually taking away the most crucial part of your unfoldment. And so, that I can say is also part of an attitude shift. I mean, our civilization is going through a meltdown, and there's nothing we can do about it. However, this meltdown also, in a way, what destroys us also rebirths us. And so why would you be interested to avert the catastrophe? Why would you be interested in averting the crisis? It's the crisis, it's the darkness, it's the cave, it's the Odyssey. It's the Odyssey that took not 1 year, but 10 years for Odysseus that forms the human into the hero. And it can't be any other way. And so to get our minds wrapped around this idea that the cancer diagnosis, the job loss, the death of a loved one, the whatever personal tragedy befalls us, and whatever civilizational catastrophe that is inevitable, to keep moving forward into that dark night, because something within is there waiting to be discovered that would be impossible to be discovered any other place. So when you give us counsel, part of your skill is to set it up as an experiment, and to alert us to the options, to alert us to the choices, and to remind us that we have what it takes. And that's, I think, where your psychological mindedness maybe comes in, because what it has felt like sometimes. I mean, I write in the book how I left my psychoanalyst for so many years to really, it was almost like a few sessions with Lynn Bell was the elixir I needed. There was some new portal that was opening, but there was also this sort of non-pathologizing ethos in which there was a steady reminder that you can and you must and you will go through this. And that there's something braver and more courageous or more whole on the other side of it as a result. I think that's an incredible message. So try to remind me next time I'm in the client seat.
Especially because you're well known for your patient smiles.
That's right.
So I have just in terms of, because I've been thinking lately. I had a conversation last week with an old friend who I knew who was talking, a mutual friend of ours from university died recently, and died of alcoholism, but quite unexpectedly, had been sending insulting emails just the week before, to one of us. And so we were talking about that, and for him, he'd known this person since he was 10 or something. And it made me think about people I've known and very young, and how their lives have changed, like what path they've walked, and did it change radically or stay pretty much the same. And I'm in an interrogation, so I guess I'm in an interrogation about fate right now. uh, uh just thinking of what could have, what was, what should have, what I think, my belief is that things can change. But the evidence doesn't always bear me out.
Mm.
I think in the work you do with the people who have a practice, with the people who choose a path of consciousness, with people who come and are looking to make meaning out of what is happening in their life, the possibility that things will change and take a different trajectory is much greater.
I actually think that one of the caveats is how much time span do you give yourself to recognize if change is possible? Because I agree with you. In any given moment, it may feel like if you just open a book to chapter 13 and you say, this is it, uh, it may be a dire thing that you can't move.
Yeah.
But if you stay with it and you go a year or you go two, chapter 13 may be a critical turning point. It may have birthed or opened something incredible. And it's largely got to do, I mean, when we're so close to the trees and we can't see the forest, at that moment it feels so dire and intractable. I for sure, even the most spiritually inclined clients that I have, and then I think there are some things. Listen, there was a classic case of this is a scholar, a reputed scholar, a Buddhist scholar who wrote several books on emptiness. I mean, he's one of the, and which is the pinnacle philosophy of Buddhism. It is the highest realization, and he's written several books on this. He confessed that when his wife, who he of 40 years died of cancer, that he was absolutely beside himself and lost. And in any given moment, it's like it doesn't matter how spiritual, it doesn't matter how well equipped, well resourced, it doesn't matter what the path before you has provided or offered. Some things just leave us legless.
Yeah.
But then if the story ends there, yeah, but the story never ends there. And what we do in the months and years in the wake of that, I think that then becomes another series of choice points that could alchemize what happened into something more compassion, a deeper understanding, more humility. Um, who knows? Or more rigidity, more bitterness, more cold-heartedness, more defensiveness, more narcissism, also possible. So then maybe, yes, it comes back to what you said, those that are at least have a path, maybe have a better chance at transforming it in its wake, but in the midst of it. And I think this is important because I think I really like to help people avoid a spiritual bypass that somehow, just because they've had 20 years of meditation training, that they should somehow know how to handle every single moment with grace.
Sure. Yeah.
But no, we're just human beings, and
Mm.
and the human experience is sometimes cruel.
Mm.
Yeah. So anyway, uh, if there's not a last alignment at the end of 2025 that you want to alert us to, I will open it up to the group if one or two questions may be there.
Let's open it up to the group.
Okay. Anybody out there? You know, we had Phil Cousineau. Do you know Phil Cousineau?
I
Have
do.
you ever? Oh, you do know Phil Cousineau.
I've not met him, but I know who he is. Yeah.
Oh, he's a lovely soul. That's so eloquent.
Something to listen to. Can we
Yes.
listen? Can I sign up and listen retrospectively?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he's beautiful. I can happily forward you all the lectures in the series. You'll get to hear Andrew and Bob and Ian, other great speakers. And so anybody out there have any questions whatsoever for Lynn Bell? You have a chance here for esteemed astrologers forecast or anything like that, or anything that we talked about in terms of the archetypes, or it was a very animated session. I don't think it was linear at all. We were well into our right brains, Lynn and I, today.
Would you give us contact in case we want to have a session with Lynn?
Oh yeah,
Sure. I can type in my email here.
I'll also put it in the I'll put it in the next email so that anybody who
and I'll be more available after I get back from Istanbul at the end of May.
Well, it's lynnbell.com. That's the very least that we can put out there in the
lynnbell@mac.com. Yeah. Or astrology. lynnbellastrology.com is my website.
There you go. Lynn Bell Astrology.
And you can find lectures and things there.
I missed the first half. Hi, Miles. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Danielle. Nice to see you.
I love seeing you both together. You guys are wonderful. I really wanted to. I didn't catch the first half, so I would love to listen to it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Miles put me in touch with Lynn. I can attest to everything that Miles said about her. She truly is a wonderful person to connect with on all astrological things. And Miles, I haven't finished reading your book. I look forward to finishing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, you're someone that's living that elixir journey, because I've seen that huge transformation in your life.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to this cycle coming up, because I think that everything you're speaking to creatively is coming alive. Very much so. Yeah. Thank you.
We'll see you.
Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah.
Lynn, if there's nothing further, is there anything that you're looking forward to in 2025? Is there anything novel that you're doing? Something that you're branching out or trying something, experimenting with anything?
Well, what am I doing novelly? I am coming back to the US in October. I'm teaching, Maurice Fernandez has organized a weekend to the divine feminine, and this is again because we're so much into AI and adventure and the awakening of a certain masculine archetype, that the passage of Jupiter into Cancer is something, and all the planets going back into water in the fall is something that we wanted to address. So there'll be a weekend at Omega in early October, and that should be a really wonderful experience. And after that, there's maybe something else that's not decided yet, but I'll also be back in Park City, Utah, doing an intensive for students of astrology on a particular subject, on the difficult things in the personal chart and how to work with those. And those are amazing. Those are 3 days intensive with a group of, well, last time I think we were 11 students, but it's often 9 students in a little townhouse in an extraordinarily beautiful setting in the mountains above Salt Lake City, which was a really fabulous experience. I'll be doing that again in mid-October, so I'll be in the US then. And I'm sure there are other things, but right now I'm coming off a period, as I said, of just really like needing maybe a little tiny bit of integration of all of this, and doing some reflecting on where it is all going to land. And some of it activates my own chart. The incoming energy activates my own chart very, very strongly, because I have for those of you who are astrologers will understand this. I have the ruler of my chart at 0 degrees of Gemini. So when Uranus enters, it will activate my chart very strongly. So I probably won't be sleeping much, is my guess. Again, the sleep thing, you know, not like, no, but there are ways to deal with that. So yeah, I haven't had much time to really think about that personally, right? So I'm in and then we'll see. And I tend to wait and see what comes towards me, Miles. I'm that kind of person. That's how things move in my life.
There's a lot of courage and faith in that, I think, and a lot of wisdom behind that. I guess the other mode would be chasing and pushing the issue, and so I mean that really testament to your longevity to be able to find that courage to just let things come as they are. Lynn, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, and I felt
for your time.
Again, thank you very much for choosing to speak with me on this extraordinary full moon day of Vesak, which we celebrate the
What is
birth.
enlightenment? Yeah.
We celebrate the birth of enlightenment. Yeah. So what a day to choose, Miles. Very honored, and I'm always moved to speak with you.
Thank
and
you
by
so
the
much.
incredible work you're doing.
Yeah, it means so much to me to have an opportunity to share the birthing of Elixir into the world, because you're in those pages. So thank you for everything that you did and have done and will do.
Yeah.
And I wish you health and some time to integrate in the coming months.
Yeah.
That's not a bad set of advice for most of us, I think. So to slow down a little bit and just metabolize everything that we're going through light speed with right now. I may have to listen to this conversation myself again. So.
and yeah, and I think, and congratulations on your book. It's really a wonderful accomplishment, and there's so much. There are areas I was less interested in the astrology part, because I know about that. I was really interested in some of the things you bring from Tibetan Buddhism, and I loved the way so many things came together, and the power of the journey and the process that comes through the pages. It's a real gift.
You know, one of my hopes with Elixir was that I could have more conversations like this. And so, you know, I think this kind of interdisciplinary dialogue, when we can crawl out of our own disciplines, our own silos, have these conversations, is really rich and meaningful for me.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to thank you and everybody on the call, and anybody who will come through the Elixir Festival and enjoy the conversations with these esteemed guests and authors. And also just thank you for all the work that each of you are doing. I know recognize some nice people and faces on the line, people I care about and inspired by. There's Akiko-san, who's doing incredible work in bringing a old heritage, regenerative building system from Japan and reinstalling it and rebooting in Bali, which I think is a wonderful archetypes. I mean, so I just think people like Akiko, these people that I don't know, I know each and every one of you are doing something novel in the world, doing something creative and bringing forth some sort of elixir at this pivotal time in human history. So let's all celebrate. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Miles.
Thank you.
Hey. There you are. Yes, nice to see you again.
There are somebody's in the dark. There are people in the dark. People in the
Yes.
You're done. Okay, I'm sure we'll have many other people who speak, who come and listen to this after the fact. So
Yeah.
I'll
Hi, and hi to them too.
okay. All right.
Thank you, everybody. All be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.